public education. Are you not concerned about all the cuts in public education and what this means to our teachers, the teachers' assistants that are being turned, all the textbooks? I'm sure they don't have textbooks in their classrooms. When I went to school at Enloe, it was a brand new school, a brand new everything. We had everything we needed. All of us went off to college and became something. These kids don't stand a chance today with all these cuts.
See, my concern with public schools is that they have the resources, but I also am concerned about the outcomes that we have, about whether or not our kids are achieving, about whether or not our kids can read, about whether or not they have a chance to get through public schools. You know, 40% of our kids who are in the third grade are not reading at grade level in the third grade. Well, we think we know why, but we also know that of that 40%, a great number of them are not graduating from high school. They are not having an opportunity to continue to live what my parents told me was the American dream, and that was that you have an opportunity to help yourself, that you have an opportunity to get an education, get that education, and you have an opportunity to succeed. So what we've done over the past 3 years is we've implemented a program. It's somewhat controversial, and there's some concerns about it, called Read to Achieve, to help ensure that our kids have the tools that they need in order to be able to read once they finish the third grade. Because that's the point in education where you have stopped the part where you learn to read and you use that skill to read to learn. And so we're moving forward with that program. We put additional money into that. We funded how many thousand additional teachers last year particularly for that program. Now, if you look at the total amount of money that's being spent in K-12 public education in North Carolina, we actually have funded more state dollars, K-12 education in the last several years than have ever been funded before, have ever been spent before. And the budget the Senate adopted this year funds public education, K-12 education, even more. I don't know, there are certain things in K-12 education that have been reduced, but the overall funding has been going up. And one of the reasons that we reduced some of those funding issues this year in the Senate budget is because we wanted to make sure teachers got a substantial raise. I quite frankly am sick and tired of hearing about North Carolina being 47th in public school teacher pay. So what we did in the Senate budget is we funded enough to move North Carolina from 47th to 27th in public education teachers, the base salary for public education teachers. Now, in doing that, we made some hard choices because we couldn't fund that level of raise and still have money to do some other things. So we tried to make some modifications in terms of where we spend money. A couple of tough choices we made. One was...
So, Senator, I don't want to be rude, but you're actually speaking to a bunch of folks who have spent a lot of time thinking about the budget and what the folks
Sure.
And so we hear the argument that you're making. We've been reading it in the paper and been watching it on television. The reality is, I think that there's a couple of things that maybe we'd like to address about what you just said in
Sure.
the budget proposal, and then we'd also actually like to just go ahead and get to what we want to share with you tonight and get your response to it.
Okay.
So first, with respect to the things that you've raised already, when you account for the number of students that have the increase in student population in North Carolina, the per pupil expenditure has continued to stay at the bottom. So while we may be spending more than we ever have, we're spending the same amount or less per student that we ever have. So the reality is we can put this number out all we want about how high it's going, but the reality is our student population is going up higher than that. So what we're seeing in the classroom is not more resources than we've ever seen. We're actually seeing considerably less than we've ever seen. So in the course of 10 years, that's what we're doing.
Well, where would the money come from?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
That's
where we're coming.
Because that really is the issue.
Yep. We got a solution. We got a solution for you.
And
okay. Well, so in terms of outcomes, right? You spoke to outcomes and you said, we're looking for, reach to achieve, see, that we can get all students reading by third grade level, and I think everybody in here is committed to that idea in the same way that you are. Those of us that are in school, those of us that are having conversations with third grade teachers, every single third grade teacher that I know that I've had a conversation with around the state is ready to quit over Read to Achieve.
My daughter-in-law is a third grade teacher.
Sure, so there may be an exception or two. However,
I'd like to interject. Your daughter's a third grade teacher. Your daughter-in-law. My daughter's a third grade student. My daughter is an excellent leader. She probably reads on an 8th grade level. Read to Achieve had her at the rank of tier order when she was going to go to 4th grade. These kids were being tested and individualized. The disaster of the rollout of the reading.
Let me ask you a question.
The disaster
Call
of
them
the
and ask them,
rollout
can I
of the
kill this
reading
live view
program
before it's
in
totally
January.
dead?
Teachers found out about it before Christmas break, and it was rolled out in January. Kids were testing for over 3 to 4 hours a week on just this one thing alone. This doesn't count preparatory testing for EOG. This doesn't count DIBELS. This doesn't count all the other testing that kids are undergoing. It was robbing teachers of classroom teaching time. It was scaring kids to death. The idea that that was moving reading scores forward, no, it was not. Testing is not learning, and that's what our students are really suffering from under all this information.
Let me just respond to that. Read to Achieve program was adopted by the General Assembly in July of 2012. And you're absolutely right. The teachers didn't get the materials until January of 2014. Now, the General Assembly did what the General Assembly was required to do to pass the legislation. It was up to DPI to put together the portfolios, and they did that, and to get those portfolios into the schools at an appropriate time. DPI didn't get those portfolios to the schools until, as you said, January of 2014. So the question is whether or not the program itself is the problem, or whether or not the rollout. And you mentioned the rollout. I would acknowledge the rollout was the problem. But the rollout was not the legislation. The rollout was the implementation of the legislation. And that was where the problem was. Now, what we did when we saw that was happening, what we did is we went forward with asking the State Board of Education to make changes in what would be an appropriate alternative assessment for the kids in third grade, so that we could take that kind of pressure off the kids. You're right, that was absolutely unfair for those third grade kids to have those sorts of problems. But it was not, the problem was not the law. The problem was the implementation